The knife pressed against her throat as Lyra's hands trembled at her sides. Ambassador Kale's security detail had her cornered in the observation deck, their crystalline weapons humming with lethal energy. She'd been caught tampering with the wedding transmission codes, and now there was nowhere to run. The vastness of space stretched behind the viewport, indifferent to her impending execution. "You have 10 seconds to explain yourself before I authorize lethal force," the lead guard said, his chitinous armor reflecting the starlight in fractured patterns. Why would a human technician sabotage the most important diplomatic union in 5 centuries? Lyra's breath came in sharp gasps. The truth would condemn her faster than silence. But she was out of options. Because Princess Vara doesn't know what she's agreeing to. Because Ambassador Kale murdered my sister on Colony 7, and your government covered it up. Because this marriage is a lie built on genocide. The guard's expression didn't change, but his weapon lowered a fraction. "That's a severe accusation. It's the truth. Check the transmission I was uploading. It contains proof surveillance footage from the colony massacre, financial records showing the payoffs, communications between KL and the Imperial Command, authorizing the extermination of human settlements. Your princess is about to marry a war criminal." Before the guard could respond, alarms shrieked through the ship. Red emergency lights bathed the corridor in blood-colored illumination. A voice crackled over the intercom in the Zithian language, urgent and panicked. The guard pressed his communicator to his temple, listened for 3 seconds. Then his face went pale beneath his translucent skin. "The princess has halted the ceremony. She's demanding to see the human technician immediately." Lyra's heart hammered. "What? I don't know how. But she's seen your transmission. She's threatening to destroy the Alliance if you're not brought to her within 5 minutes. The guard grabbed Lyra's arm, no longer hostile but frantic. "Move. Now. If this alliance collapses, 3 systems go to war by morning." They ran through corridors lined with shocked alien dignitaries, past windows showing the massive congregation ships gathered for the wedding broadcast. Thousands of vessels hung in space, representing dozens of species, all waiting for the union that would solidify peace across the frontier. And Lyra had just thrown a grenade into the center of it all. The throne room doors burst open. Princess Vara stood at the altar in her ceremonial armor, towering and magnificent. Her 4 arms spread wide in a gesture Lyra recognized as Zithian fury. Ambassador Kale stood beside her, his perfect diplomatic mask cracking as he saw Lyra dragged into the chamber. "You." Vara's voice resonated through the vast space, translated instantly by the neural implants all attendees wore. "You're the one who sent me this evidence?" Lyra straightened despite her fear. "Yes, Your Highness. I'm sorry to interrupt your wedding, but you deserve to know the truth about the man you were about to marry." Vara's eyes, 3 of them, arranged in a triangle across her elongated face, fixed on Lyra, with an intensity that made the human feel stripped to her bones. Then, something impossible happened. The princess's rigid posture softened. Her breathing quickened in a pattern Lyra didn't understand. The room's temperature seemed to drop, as every Scythian present went utterly still. "What is your name?" Vara asked quietly. "Lyra Chen. Lyra Chen." Vara repeated it like a prayer, like a secret. "Show me your left wrist." Confused, Lyra held out her arm. Vara descended from the altar in 3 smooth strides and grasped Lyra's hand with surprising gentleness. The princess's fingers traced the scar tissue that wrapped around Lyra's wrist, the burn marks from the energy shackles she'd worn as a prisoner after the Colony 7 attack. Vara's breath caught. She looked up, and Lyra saw something terrifying in those alien eyes. Recognition. "It's you," Vara whispered. "The human from the rescue ship. 5 years ago, during the border skirmish near the Helix Nebula. You pulled me from the wreckage." Lyra's mind reeled. She remembered that day, a damaged Scythian fighter drifting near the human medical vessel where she'd been stationed. Against orders, She'd suited up and brought the injured pilot aboard. The face had been so covered in blood and debris she'd never seen it clearly. By the time the pilot recovered enough to speak, the Zithian military had already retrieved their officer, and Lyra had been reprimanded for the unauthorized rescue. "That was you?" Lyra breathed. "You gave me your emergency oxygen supply. You almost died saving me. I spent 5 years searching for you through diplomatic channels, but I never knew your name. Only your hands." Vara's grip tightened. "These hands. I could never forget them. And now you appear here, on my wedding day, to save me again." Kale stepped forward, his voice smooth as poison. "Your Highness? Surely you don't believe this saboteur's wild claims? She's clearly unstable, motivated by grief and conspiracy theories. Then explain these documents," Vara said coldly, projecting the evidence onto the holographic displays surrounding the altar. Footage played. Human colonies burning, KL giving orders, financial transactions marked with imperial seals. Explain why your signature appears on extermination orders. Explain why you told me the Colony 7 incident was a regrettable accident when you personally authorized the attack. Kale's expression hardened. "Those files are fabricated." "Are they?" Vara turned to her guards. "Place Ambassador Kale under arrest, pending investigation." The room exploded into chaos. Kale's personal security detail drew weapons. Zithian royal guards moved to intercept them. Diplomats screamed and scattered. Lyra found herself pulled behind Vara's armored form as energy blasts scorched the air where she'd been standing. "My ship," Vara said urgently. Her voice meant only for Lyra. "We need to reach my ship. If Kale's people have infiltrated my security, nowhere on this vessel is safe." "What about the alliance? The peace treaty? There can be no peace built on lies and massacre. If my people knew what KL did in our name, they would demand his execution, not his marriage into the royal family." Vara's eyes met Lyra's again, and there was something fierce and protective in her gaze. "Besides, I won't let them kill the woman who saved my life twice." They ran together through the disintegrating ceremony, through corridors now filled with fighting guards and panicked guests. Behind them, Lyra could hear KL shouting orders, organizing his loyalists. Ahead, the docking bay beckoned with the promise of escape and the terror of what came next. Vara's private fighter was a sleek thing of beauty, all curved lines and crystalline engines. They burst through the docking bay doors with seconds to spare, energy blasts chewing up the deck plating behind them. Vara sealed the hatch and threw herself into the pilot's seat, her 4 hands dancing across controls with practiced precision. "Hold on," she commanded. The ship launched like a bullet, acceleration crushing Lyra into her seat. Through the viewport, she saw the congregation ships scattered in confusion, some already firing on each other as old grudges surfaced in the chaos. Kale's flagship pursued them, massive and relentless, weapons charging with deadly light. "He's going to destroy us," Lyra said. "Not if we reach neutral space first. There's a human patrol at the border. If we can cross into their jurisdiction, Kale can't touch us without declaring war. That's 3 light minutes away. We'll never make it." Vara glanced at her, and despite everything, she smiled. "You saved me when it was impossible before. Perhaps we're both good at doing impossible things." The chase became a nightmare of evasive maneuvers, near misses, and slowly depleting shields. Lyra watched the tactical display, seeing Kale's ship gaining, seeing their shields dropping to critical levels. They were going to die out here, and the alliance would crumble, and systems would burn because Lyra couldn't let her sister's murder go unavenged. "I'm sorry," Lyra whispered. "This is my fault." "No," Vara's voice was firm. "You showed courage. You demanded truth. Those are never faults." She reached across the cockpit, one hand briefly squeezing Lyra's. "Whatever happens next, thank you." The border beacons appeared on the display, marking the edge of human space. 500 kilometers. 400. Kale's ship locked targeting solutions on them. 300 kilometers. Vara pushed the engines past their safety limits, alarms screaming. 200 kilometers. The first blast struck their stern, tearing away armor plating. The second hit knocked out their starboard engine. They were tumbling now, momentum carrying them forward, but not fast enough. Not nearly fast enough. 100 kilometers to safety, and they weren't going to make it. Then human fighters appeared like angels of war, 6 of them in tight formation, their weapons hot and ready. The lead pilot's voice crackled over the emergency channel. Unidentified Scythian vessel, you are entering human-protected space. Break off pursuit, or we will engage. Kale's ship slowed but didn't stop. The human fighters spread out, forming a barrier between the crippled royal fighter and its pursuer. For a moment, everything hung in terrible balance. Then, slowly, Kale's flagship began to turn away. Lyra let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Vara's hands were shaking on the controls. They'd crossed the border. They were alive. Everything had changed forever. But they were alive. What happens now? Lyra asked. Vara looked at her with those alien eyes that somehow seemed so familiar. Now we tell the truth. We expose Kale's crimes. We fight to rebuild the peace the right way, with honesty instead of lies. She paused. And perhaps, if you're willing, you help me do it. I could use someone who understands both our peoples. Someone brave enough to stand against injustice, even when it costs everything. Lyra thought of her sister, of the colonists who died, of the fragile peace that had been built on their graves. She thought of this alien princess who'd remembered her hands across 5 years and the darkness of space. I'm willing, Lyra said. But Your Highness, you need to know, I'm not a diplomat. I'm not trained for any of this. I'm just a technician who wanted justice. Call me Vara. And justice is exactly what we need. She smiled, genuine and warm, despite the exhaustion in her features. Besides, you're the woman who saved my life twice and exposed a war criminal on my wedding day. I think you're more capable than you believe. The human fighters escorted them to the nearest military station, a massive construct bristling with weapons and suspicion. News of the disrupted wedding had already spread across the communication networks. By the time they docked, reporters from a dozen species crowded the bay, their recording drones capturing every moment. Lyra stepped off the ship beside Vara, and the galaxy watched. A human technician and an alien princess, united by chance and courage, about to shake the foundations of interstellar politics. The journey ahead would be dangerous, filled with enemies who wanted them silenced, and allies who might prove worse. But as Vara's hand found hers, steady and strong, Lyra felt something she hadn't experienced since her sister's death. Hope. The investigation began within hours. Vara insisted on full transparency, broadcasting her testimony across all public channels. She detailed the evidence Lyra had provided, confirmed its authenticity through independent analysts, and formally accused Ambassador Kale of war crimes before the Interstellar Court. The Zithian Empire was in uproar, factions splitting between those who supported the princess and those who saw her actions as treason. Human authorities opened their own inquiries into the Colony 7 massacre. Survivors came forward with stories they'd been too afraid to tell, evidence they'd hidden, testimony that painted a picture of systematic extermination, disguised as border conflicts. Lyra found herself at the center of it all, giving depositions, identifying documents, reliving the worst day of her life over and over for official records. Through it all, Vara stayed close. The princess could have returned to her homeworld, to the safety of the imperial palace and the advisors who urged her to downplay the scandal. Instead, she remained at the human station, working alongside Lyra to build the case against Kale. They spent long hours in conference rooms, matching financial records to military operations, connecting the web of corruption that had enabled the massacres. You don't have to do this, Lyra told her one night, both of them exhausted and surrounded by data tablets. You've already risked everything. Your people need you at home. Vara looked up from the document she was translating. My people need me to be someone they can be proud of. Someone who stands for truth, even when it's difficult. She set down the tablet and moved closer. Besides, I made you a promise. We rebuild the peace. Together? Or not at all? I keep wondering if we did the right thing, Lyra admitted. The alliance was stable. Now 3 systems are on the brink of war, because I couldn't let go of my grief. The alliance was built on mass graves. That's not stability, it's a bomb waiting to explode. Vara's hand touched Lyra's shoulder. Gentle, but firm. You didn't destroy peace. You revealed that we never had it. The first trial began on neutral ground, a space station administered by the Interstellar Court. KL arrived in chains, his diplomatic immunity stripped away, facing charges that carried the death penalty in multiple jurisdictions. His lawyers argued jurisdiction, challenged evidence, attacked Lyra's credibility with savage precision. They painted her as an unstable woman consumed by grief, fabricating evidence to serve a personal vendetta. But the proof was undeniable. Financial experts traced payments from imperial accounts to mercenary groups. Military analysts matched weapon signatures from the Colony 7 attack to Scythian military arsenals. Communications specialists authenticated the orders bearing Kale's signature. Each piece of evidence formed links in a chain that wrapped tighter around the ambassador's defense. More witnesses emerged every day. A former soldier broke down on the stand, describing orders to execute civilians. A communications officer provided logs showing Kale personally overriding distress calls from the colony. A financial auditor revealed offshore accounts, holding fortunes siphoned from military budgets, money meant to bribe officials and silence witnesses. The conspiracy ran deeper than anyone had imagined. Lyra testified for 3 hours, answering questions that cut like knives, describing her sister's final transmission. The burning colony. The bodies she'd helped identify. She spoke about finding her sister's wedding ring in the ashes, about the children whose names she'd memorized from the memorial wall, about the promises of peace that had been nothing but smoke and mirrors. Her voice never wavered. Even when Kale's lawyers tried to break her with hostile questions about her mental state, her motivations, her reliability. Across the courtroom, Kale watched her with cold hatred. His perfect diplomatic mask finally cracked to reveal the monster beneath. She knew that even if justice prevailed here, he had allies who would never stop hunting her. His network of sympathizers spread across multiple systems, loyal operatives who saw him as a martyr rather than a murderer. The verdict came on the 14th day. The judges entered in solemn procession, their faces revealing nothing. The courtroom held its breath as the Chief Justice began reading the judgment. Guilty on all counts. Orchestrating the massacre of civilian populations, conspiracy to commit genocide, abuse of diplomatic authority, corruption, obstruction of justice. The list went on for 5 minutes. Kale's face remained impassive as they sentenced him to life imprisonment in a maximum security facility, but his eyes promised revenge. As the guards led him away, he looked directly at Lyra and mouthed words that made her blood run cold. This isn't over. My people will finish what I started. Lyra felt Vara's hand on her shoulder, grounding her. The princess leaned close and whispered, "Let him threaten. We've already won the most important battle. The truth is out. And it can't be buried again." Vara stood beside her as they left the courthouse, surrounded by security that now felt insufficient. He'll have people on the outside, loyalists who'll want revenge. I know, Lyra said. I knew that from the moment I uploaded the evidence. Then why did you do it? Lyra thought about that question, about her sister laughing in the sun, about the colonists who'd never gotten justice, about the peace that might have lasted another decade before someone else's massacre brought it down. Because silence felt like a worse death than anything Kale's people could do to me. The weeks that followed were tense. Diplomatic channels buzzed with negotiations as factions realigned. The Scythian Empire split between reformists who supported Vara's actions and traditionalists who saw her as a traitor. Human colonies demanded reparations. Other species watched nervously, wondering if one exposed atrocity would unravel other convenient lies. Lyra received death threats daily. Twice, assassins made it past security, stopped only by Vara's guards. The princess refused to leave Lyra's side, her protection becoming absolute. Rumors spread about their relationship. Whispers Lyra tried to ignore. She couldn't deny the warmth in Vara's eyes during late nights working together, or how her own heart jumped when the princess entered a room. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A faction of Zithian military officers, disgusted by Kale's crimes, approached Vara with evidence of other cover-ups, other massacres, a pattern of aggression that went back decades. They wanted reform, wanted to purge the corruption that had infected their command structure. But they needed the princess to lead them. "I have to return home," Vara told Lyra. "My people are ready for change, but I need to guide it. The Empire could transform or tear itself apart in civil war. I'm the only one who can tip that balance." Lyra felt something crack inside. "Of course. You should go. This was always temporary. Come with me." Lyra stared, certain she'd misheard. "Come with me to the Empire. Work with me to build the reforms. You understand both peoples. You have moral authority, a victim who chose justice over revenge. The reformists would rally behind you. Together, we could change things. I'm human. Your people would never accept me in a position of power. My people need to learn acceptance, and that starts with me showing them there's strength in cooperation." Vara stepped closer, her voice dropping to something intimate and urgent. "Lyra, I'm not asking you as a princess to a subject. I'm asking as someone who's seen your courage, your integrity, your refusal to compromise your principles, even when it would be easier. I'm asking as the woman whose life you saved twice, who wants you beside her for whatever comes next." Lyra's breath caught. "Vara, I can't. People are already talking about us. If I go with you, they'll assume there's something. Would that be so terrible?" The question hung between them, loaded with everything they hadn't said in the months of working together. Lyra thought about Vara's hands, steadying her through testimony, about late nights when their fingers brushed over data tablets, about the way the princess looked at her like she was something precious and powerful. "I'm not royalty," Lyra said weakly. "I don't know anything about imperial politics or court protocols or... You know about truth. You know about standing up when others stay silent. That's worth more than diplomatic training." Vara's hand cupped Lyra's face. "I'm not asking you to be something you're not. I'm asking you to be exactly who you are. Just somewhere else. Somewhere you can make an even bigger difference." Lyra closed her eyes, feeling the weight of decision. Going meant leaving everything familiar, stepping into a role she wasn't prepared for, making herself a permanent target. It meant accepting whatever was growing between her and this princess, this impossible connection forged in crisis. It also meant finishing what her sister started. The colonists had been building bridges between species. Kale destroyed that dream, but Lyra could rebuild it on a galactic scale. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll come with you." Vara's smile could have lit entire star systems. She pulled Lyra into an embrace that felt like coming home, like safety, like the beginning of something terrifying and wonderful. When they finally separated, both of them were shaking. "There's one more thing," Vara said quietly. "The traditionalists will fight this every step of the way. They'll try to discredit you, threaten you, maybe worse, and they'll use our closeness as ammunition, claim you're manipulating me or that I've betrayed Scythian values by caring for a human. Let them try," Lyra said with more confidence than she felt. "I've already survived Kale's assassination attempts. I can handle political attacks. You're sure? Because once we do this, there's no going back. You become a public figure, a symbol, of reform. Your life will never be private again. Lyra thought about her sister one last time, about the promise she'd made at the funeral, to make sure the truth came out, to make sure no one else suffered the same fate. She'd kept that promise. Everything that came after was just following through. "I'm sure," she said. "Let's go change the galaxy." They departed 3 days later, aboard a royal cruiser escorted by reformist ships. The journey took 2 weeks. Lyra spent them learning Scythian culture, history, politics. Vara proved a patient teacher, though lessons often dissolved into deeper conversations about philosophy, morality, justice across species lines. The attraction between them grew impossible to ignore. They sat closer during study sessions, found excuses to touch, shared looks that lasted too long. Lyra had never been attracted to a non-human before, but Vara was beautiful in ways that transcended biology. Graceful, fierce, brilliant, kind. "This is complicated," Lyra said one evening, sitting beside Vara in the observation lounge, watching the stars streak past. "Whatever this is between us, does it have to be complicated?" Vara asked. "You saved my life. I'm trying to save my people. We care about each other. Why analyze beyond that? Because you're a princess and I'm a technician. Because our peoples barely managed peace. Because if this is real, it'll be used against us. And if it's real, it's worth fighting for." Vara took Lyra's hand. "I spent 5 years wondering if I'd ever see you again. Now you're here. Brave and brilliant, making me want to be better. I won't apologize for that, or hide it to make traditionalists comfortable. You might have to, for political reasons. Then politics needs to change too." Vara smiled, fierce and determined. "We're already rewriting everything else. Why not this?" The Zithian homeworld appeared like a jewel, massive, ringed with moons, its surface a tapestry of crystalline cities and bioluminescent oceans. As they descended, Lyra saw crowds gathering, some with support banners, others holding signs of hatred for the human who'd destroyed their ambassador's career. Security was overwhelming at the palace. They hurried through corridors lined with architectural wonders, past startled courtiers and suspicious nobles, until they reached the throne room, where the Imperial Council waited. Lyra had expected hostility, and got it. Traditionalists questioned why a human was before the council, implying Vara had been compromised, but reformists held firm. And Vara's testimony about Kale's crimes had swayed public opinion enough that outright opposition would be political suicide. "We propose a new position," Vara announced. "Ambassador of Interspecies Relations, reporting to the throne. Lyra Chen will rebuild trust between our people and human colonies, ensuring transparency and providing oversight to prevent future atrocities." The room erupted. Traditionalists called it an insult to sovereignty. Reformists praised it as bold progress. Lyra stood silent beside Vara's throne, projecting confidence she didn't feel, aware half the room wanted her dead. The vote was closer than expected. 51 in favor, 49 against. Lyra Chen became the first human to hold an official position in the Zithian imperial government, and the death threats started immediately. The first assassination attempt came during her inauguration ceremony. A traditionalist guard managed to get past security with a concealed plasma blade, rushing the stage before being cut down by Vara's personal detail. The blade missed Lyra by centimeters, close enough that she felt its heat. Vara pulled her behind the throne, shielding her with her own body until the threat was neutralized. "This is what I meant," Vara said afterward, both of them still shaking. "They won't stop until we're both dead. Or they are. Then we need to move faster," Lyra replied. "Implement reforms before they organize properly. Show results that make us too popular to kill without backlash." They worked relentlessly. Lyra coordinated sister city programs between Scythian and human communities. She negotiated reparations for victims, fought for transparent military reporting, built reformist networks. Vara backed every initiative with royal authority, shielding changes from traditionalist sabotage. 6 months in, something remarkable happened. A joint colony discovered a new terraforming method and shared it freely, creating a cooperation template that spread across the frontier. Support for reforms jumped 15 points, but success brought danger. Traditionalists grew desperate. Intelligence suggested they were planning something major. A strike to decapitate the reform movement. Vara increased security, but both knew determined assassins would eventually find a way through. The attack came during a diplomatic summit, a gathering of reformists from multiple species meant to formalize new cooperation treaties. Intelligence had warned them something was brewing, but the specifics remained maddeningly vague. Traditionalist chatter on encrypted channels spiked in the days before the summit. Known operatives moved into position around the conference venue. Security sweeps found nothing, but the air felt electric with impending violence. Lyra stood backstage as Vara prepared for her keynote speech, watching the princess review her notes one final time. The conference center was packed over 300 delegates representing 27 species, all gathered to witness the formal establishment of the new alliance framework. Cameras broadcasted the event across the galaxy. It was the perfect target for anyone wanting to make a statement. "Something's wrong," Lyra said, her instincts screaming warnings she couldn't articulate. "The security sweeps were too clean. We didn't find anything." "Because there's nothing to find," Vara replied. But her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her ceremonial sash. "We've checked everything 3 times. The building is secure. That's what worries me. They're too smart to try something obvious." Lyra pulled up the security feeds on her tablet, scanning for anything out of place. What if the threat isn't inside the building? What if it is the building? Vara's eyes widened. She grabbed her communicator and barked orders to the security chief, demanding a structural integrity scan of the Foundation. 60 seconds passed. 90. The chief's voice came back, tense and urgent. "Ma'am, we're detecting anomalies in the substructure. Multiple points showing irregularities in the scan patterns. It could be interference." "Evacuate," Vara commanded. "Full evacuation, right now. Code black." Alarms shrieked through the building. Security personnel moved with practiced efficiency, herding confused delegates toward the exits. Some protested, thinking it was a drill or an overreaction. Others, veterans of conflict, recognized the genuine terror in the guards' faces and ran without question. Lyra grabbed Vara's arm, pulling the princess toward the nearest emergency exit. They were halfway to safety when the first explosion detonated. Not inside the building, that would have been too simple. The traditionalists had planted charges in the underground transit tunnel that ran beneath the conference center, timed to collapse the entire structure. The blast wave hit like a physical wall, throwing bodies through the air. Ceiling panels crashed down. Support columns groaned and began to buckle. Lyra found herself on the floor, ears ringing, tasting blood. Beside her, Vara struggled to rise, her ceremonial armor cracked and leaking coolant fluid. Around them, the building was dying, floor by floor. A cascading failure that would bury everyone inside within minutes. Emergency lighting flickered on, casting everything in hellish red illumination. "Move!" Vara shouted, hauling Lyra to her feet. They ran through corridors filling with dust and smoke, following emergency markers toward exits that might not exist anymore. Behind them, they could hear the building collapsing, a roar like an angry god consuming its sacrifice. A support beam crashed across their path. They detoured, finding a service corridor that led toward the loading docks. Other survivors joined them, delegates bleeding from cuts, security personnel carrying wounded colleagues, staff members helping each other through the chaos. Lyra counted heads frantically, recognizing faces from the summit registration. So many were missing, trapped in collapsed sections or too far from exits to reach safety. They burst through the loading dock doors into daylight, just as the central tower collapsed. The explosion was massive. Shaped charges perfectly placed, to bring the entire structure down in a controlled demolition. It was beautiful in a horrific way. A precisely executed architectural murder, designed to look like a structural failure if anyone asked questions later. But one of the conspirators got cold feet. A young traditionalist officer, disgusted by the plan to kill hundreds of innocent delegates, leaked details to the reformist intelligence network hours before the attack. The evacuation had saved most of the attendees, but the destruction was total. The conference center was gone, replaced by a mountain of rubble and shattered dreams. Lyra collapsed onto the pavement, gasping for air, watching emergency crews rush toward the wreckage to search for survivors. Beside her, Vara was already on her communicator, coordinating rescue efforts, demanding arrest warrants for every suspect on the intelligence watch list. The princess's voice was steady, commanding, but Lyra could see the fury burning in her alien eyes. "They tried to kill all of us," Vara said when she finally ended the call. 300 delegates, dozens of species, the entire reform leadership. If that officer hadn't warned us, if we'd delayed the evacuation by even a minute. But we didn't, Lyra interrupted. We're alive. Most of the delegates are alive. And now we have proof of what the traditionalists are willing to do to stop progress. The investigation exposed dozens of high-ranking traditionalists. Evidence was damning. Public outrage swung opinion decisively toward reform. Vara pushed through stalled legislation, restructuring military command, establishing oversight boards, codifying rights for all species. They were winning. And through it all, Lyra and Vara grew closer, their partnership evolving into something deeper, something that made the danger worthwhile. And through it all, Lyra and Vara grew closer, their partnership evolving into something deeper, something that made the late nights and constant danger worthwhile. "I need to tell you something," Vara said one evening after another. Council session. "About why I froze when I first saw you. About why I recognized your hands. I'm what I god." Vara session. "I'm more stocks." Lyra waited, seeing vulnerability in the princess's features. In Scythian culture, there's Koresh, someone who changes your fate at a crucial moment. When you pulled me from that wreckage, you were my Koresh. I was supposed to die. Instead, you saved me, and everything after was borrowed time, a gift I had to honor. I searched for you for years, not just to thank you, but because our fates were tied. That's why you couldn't marry Kale. Not just his crimes, but because he wasn't my Koresh. Yes. Vara moved closer. You've saved my life twice. You've made me better, braver, more honest, and I want to spend whatever time we have building this future together. Not just as partners, but as... Lyra kissed her, finally giving in to what they'd circled for months. When they broke apart, both were crying. As this, Lyra finished. Whatever this is, Vara agreed. They announced their relationship the next day during a joint address. The announcement was brief, matter of fact. Reaction was predictable outrage from traditionalists, celebration from reformists, confusion from those who'd never considered interspecies romance. But something remarkable happened. Other mixed couples came forward. Humans and Zithians, who'd hidden relationships out of fear. Then other species joined, a cascade revealing a frontier where people had connected across species lines for generations. Lyra and Vara became symbols and targets. 3 more assassination attempts in as many months, each more sophisticated. Security became suffocating. But they refused to hide. "We can't live like this forever," Lyra said, after the 3rd attempt, watching medics treat a wounded guard who'd taken a blade meant for her. "Eventually they'll get lucky, or we'll make a mistake, and one of us won't walk away. Then we finish the reforms faster," Vara replied. They worked with desperate urgency, pushing legislation, building institutions, training a new generation of diplomats and leaders who believed in their vision. The empire transformed around them. shedding centuries of isolationism and supremacy. It was messy, imperfect, plagued by setbacks and compromises. But it was real change, the kind that couldn't be easily undone. 2 years after the wedding that never was, the Interstellar Court formally recognized the new Zithian-Human Alliance Treaty, a document that guaranteed rights for all species within both territories, established mutual defense agreements, and created permanent institutions for conflict resolution. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest, built on transparency and accountability, rather than convenient lies. Vara and Lyra stood together at the signing ceremony, watching representatives from dozens of species put their marks on the treaty. Around them, the ghosts of Colony 7 felt appeased, their deaths finally meaning something beyond grief. Your sister would be proud, Vara said quietly. She would have done this better, faster, with less violence. Lyra leaned against the princess's shoulder, exhausted and satisfied. But yes, I think she'd be proud. What do we do now, when the emergency is over and we're not fighting for survival anymore? Lyra thought about that question. About the future they'd built through courage and stubbornness and love. We keep going. There are other colonies that need support, other injustices that need exposing, other alliances that need honest foundations. Together? Vara asked. Always together. Lyra confirmed. They walked out of the ceremony hand in hand, into a galaxy that was still dangerous, still imperfect, but infinitely better than it had been when a technician decided to upload evidence of war crimes on a princess's wedding day. Behind them, the treaty was sealed. Ahead, the future beckoned, uncertain and hopeful. Somewhere in the diplomatic quarter, a traditionalist operative watched them leave and activated an encrypted communicator. The war wasn't over, just evolved. But so had the reformists. For every assassin, there were 10 new allies. For every setback, 20 victories. The old order was dying, slowly and violently, but dying nonetheless. Lyra felt the weight of the target on her back, knew that danger would never truly leave, but she also felt Vara's hand in hers, steady and warm, and the satisfaction of knowing they'd already accomplished the impossible. Everything else was just details. They had stood against a marriage built on lies and genocide. They had frozen tradition in its tracks and rebuilt it into something worthy of the future. They had saved each other, repeatedly, in ways both literal and profound, and they had proved that courage, truth, and love were stronger than any conspiracy, any hatred, any weapon wielded by those who feared change. The galaxy turned on its axis, and 2 women walked through it together, defiant and unafraid, leaving a trail of honest hope in their wake. The story of how they met had become legend. The princess who froze upon seeing the human. The wedding that shattered. The alliance reborn. But the best part of the story was still being written. One difficult day at a time, by people who refused to accept that injustice was inevitable. And in the end, that refusal made all the difference.